The Lakari ship that landed in the quarry was unlike anything Marcus had ever imagined. It seemed to be made of the same silver material as Storm's fur, flowing and organic rather than constructed. As its hatch opened, Marcus felt a wave of warmth and welcome that was almost overwhelming. The first Lakari to emerge was clearly an adult version of Storm, with the same elegant bone structure and intelligent violet eyes, but larger and more imposing. This one's fur was pure silver with threads of gold, and there was an aura of authority about him that spoke of leadership. Behind him came others, each unique but sharing the same basic characteristics that made Storm so remarkable. Their movements were fluid and graceful, and Marcus could sense the intelligence radiating from them even without the mental connection he shared with Storm. Through his link with Storm, Marcus understood that the silver and gold Lakari was Storm's father, a leader among their people and one of the most respected minds in their civilization. His name was something like a harmony of wind and starlight. But Storm suggested Marcus call him Astron. Astron approached slowly, his violet eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that was both intimidating and reassuring. When he spoke, his voice came not through sound but directly through the mental link Marcus shared with Storm. "You are the human who freed my son and fought off the Zalari." It wasn't a question, but Marcus nodded anyway. Through the link, he could feel Astron's amazement as the Lakari leader examined the bond between Marcus and Storm. "What you have accomplished should not be possible," Astron continued. "Humans are supposed to be a young species, barely advanced beyond your planetary boundaries. Yet you have demonstrated capabilities that rival our most accomplished engineers." Marcus felt a flush of pride, but also uncertainty. "I had help," he said, glancing at Storm. "Storm taught me everything I needed to know." Astron's response surprised him. Through the mental link, Marcus felt something that could only be described as laughter. "My son shared knowledge with you, yes, but knowledge without the ability to apply it is useless. What you have done required not just information but wisdom, creativity, and courage. These are qualities that cannot be taught." Other Lakari were emerging from the ship now, and Marcus could sense their excitement as they examined the crystalline devices he had built. Through their shared amazement, he began to understand just how remarkable his accomplishments really were. The fusion of human ingenuity with Lakari principles had created something entirely new. Marcus had not simply copied alien technology. He had improved upon it, creating hybrid devices that were more efficient and effective than anything either species had developed alone. But more than that, the bond between Marcus and Storm represented something unprecedented in galactic history. The Lakari had established diplomatic relations with dozens of species, but never had they encountered the kind of deep, permanent connection that had formed between the human boy and the alien wolf. Through Storm's translation, Astron explained what this meant. Marcus was no longer simply a human who had helped a Lakari. He was spirit-linked to Storm, making him part of the Lakari pack family in the deepest possible sense. By their laws and customs, Marcus was now as much a Lakari as he was human. The implications were staggering. Marcus would be welcome on any Lakari world, with access to their knowledge and technology. But more importantly, he would serve as humanity's first ambassador to the galactic community. "Your species intrigues us," Astron said through the mental link. "We have observed human history from a distance, watching your development with interest. You are remarkably adaptable, creative, and resilient, but we never imagined you were capable of this level of achievement." Marcus felt a weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He was no longer just Marcus Chen from a small town nobody had ever heard of. He was representing all of humanity to an advanced alien civilization, but Storm's presence in his mind was reassuring, reminding him that he wasn't facing this alone. The bond between them meant that Storm would always be there to guide and support him, just as Marcus had guided and supported Storm. Astron gestured toward the crashed Zalari ships scattered around the forest. "What do you wish to do with them?" Marcus thought for a moment, feeling the weight of the decision. The Zalari had committed terrible crimes, enslaving innocents and treating intelligent life as property. They deserved to face justice for their actions, but Marcus also understood that this moment represented an opportunity. Earth was about to make contact with the galactic community, and how they handled this situation would set the tone for everything that followed. "They should face trial for their crimes," Marcus said finally. "But not just Lakari justice. Human justice too. They came to our world and committed crimes here. We have a right to be involved in deciding their fate. Astron's approval radiated through the mental link. You think like a true diplomat, he said. Your species shows great promise. Over the following hours, more Lycari ships arrived, along with vessels from other species that were part of the galactic community. Marcus found himself at the center of the most important first contact in human history, and somehow he felt ready for it. Storm stayed close by his side throughout the proceedings, their mental link providing constant support and translation, but Marcus was surprised to discover that he was beginning to understand the other species directly, without needing Storm's help. The bond between them was continuing to evolve, granting Marcus capabilities that went far beyond what either species possessed alone. He was becoming something new, a bridge between worlds that could help humanity take its place among the stars. As the sun set over the quarry, Marcus stood with Storm on the rim, looking out over the forest where the crashed Zalari ships were being secured by Lycari recovery teams. In the distance, he could see the lights of his hometown, unaware that everything had just changed. What happens now? Marcus asked. Storm's response came as a flood of images and possibilities. There would be formal contact between humanity and the galactic community. Earth would be invited to join the Interstellar Alliance with all the benefits and responsibilities that entailed. Marcus would play a crucial role in that process, serving as humanity's advocate and guide. He would travel to other worlds, meet other species, and help establish the trade and cultural relationships that would define Earth's future. But most importantly, he would continue to grow and learn, supported by the bond he shared with Storm. Together, they would explore the galaxy, seeking out new knowledge and new friends, always remembering the lesson they had learned in an abandoned quarry. Sometimes the most important moments in history begin with the simplest acts of kindness. A boy helping a creature in need. A choice to do what was right, regardless of the consequences. Marcus Chen had found a chained alien wolf pup left to die. When he got closer, everything changed. Not just for him, not just for Storm, but for all of humanity. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and thanks to the bond between a human boy and an alien wolf, humanity was finally ready to explore it. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Marcus felt a sense of anticipation that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with possibility. The real adventure was just beginning, and he would face it with his spirit-linked partner by his side. The bond they had forged would guide humanity to the stars, proving that compassion, creativity, and determination were the greatest technologies of all. In a small-town quarry, a friendship had been born that would reshape the galaxy, and it all started with a boy who refused to walk away from someone who needed help. The future was bright with promise, and Marcus Chen was ready to help humanity claim its place among the stars. The first Zalari ship became visible as it descended through the quarry's opening, its stealth systems failing in the face of the energy field Marcus had created. The vessel was smaller than Marcus had expected, sleek and predatory like a mechanical shark, but it wasn't alone. Through his enhanced senses, Marcus could detect at least 4 other ships positioning themselves around the quarry's rim. The Zalari were taking no chances with their escaped prisoner. The lead ship settled onto the quarry floor with barely a whisper of sound. A hatch opened in its side, and Marcus got his first look at the beings who had tormented Storm and countless others. The Zalari were tall and thin, with pale gray skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Their large black eyes showed no emotion, and their movements were precise but somehow wrong, as if they were machines pretending to be alive. 3 of them emerged from the ship, carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. Marcus could feel the malevolent purpose radiating from them like heat from a fire. Through their mental link, Storm shared what he knew about Zalari tactics. They would try to capture him alive if possible, but they would kill Marcus without hesitation. To them, humans were just another primitive species, unworthy of consideration. Marcus felt a cold anger building in his chest. These beings had torn families apart, enslaved children, and treated intelligent life as nothing more than property. They had chained Storm like an animal and left him to die, but they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated what a human could accomplish when pushed beyond his limits. The lead Zalari raised its weapon, pointing it directly at Marcus. When it spoke, its voice was like the sound of breaking glass. Return the property to us, and your death will be swift. Marcus stepped forward, placing himself between the Zalari and Storm. His hands were steady, his voice calm. He's not property. He's my friend. The Zalari's response was to fire its weapon. A beam of sickly green energy lanced across the quarry, aimed directly at Marcus's chest, but the beam never reached him. The defensive field Marcus had created absorbed the energy, the crystalline matrices glowing brighter as they converted the attack into harmless light. The Zalari's reaction was immediate confusion, then rage. They had never encountered technology that could neutralize their weapons so easily. Marcus smiled, feeling Storm's fierce approval through their mental link. My turn. The defensive devices Marcus had built weren't just for protection. Drawing on Lycari knowledge and human ingenuity, he had created something entirely new. Something that could take the Zalari's own energy weapons and turn them back on their users. Marcus activated the offensive matrices, and beams of crystallized energy erupted from the quarry walls. But these weren't the crude energy blasts the Zalari used. These were precision instruments designed to disable rather than destroy. The first beam struck the lead Zalari's weapon, causing it to overload and explode in its hands. The second beam hit the creature itself, sending it crashing to the ground in convulsions as its nervous system was overwhelmed. The other two Zalari tried to retreat to their ship, but Marcus was faster. Through his link with Storm, he could anticipate their movements before they made them. More energy beams lanced out, striking the fleeing aliens and dropping them before they could reach safety. But the real test came from above. The other Zalari ships had witnessed the fate of the ground team, and they were not about to make the same mistakes. Instead of landing, they began bombarding the quarry from above with heavy weapons. The ancient stone walls shook under the assault, and chunks of rock rained down around Marcus and Storm. But the defensive field held, converting the incoming energy into power that fed back into Marcus's devices. Through their mental connection, Storm shared his amazement. What Marcus had accomplished should have been impossible. Human technology was supposed to be primitive, incapable of matching advanced galactic weapon systems. But Marcus had proven that raw technological superiority meant nothing in the face of human creativity and determination. He had taken alien principles and applied them in ways that even the Lycari had never considered. The bombardment continued for several minutes, but gradually the Zalari ship's weapons began to weaken. Their energy cells were depleting faster than they could recharge, while Marcus's defensive field grew stronger with each attack. Finally, the ship stopped firing and began to withdraw. Marcus could sense their confusion and growing fear through the electromagnetic spectrum. They had never encountered resistance like this from a supposedly primitive world. But Marcus wasn't finished with them yet. Drawing on every technique Storm had shared with him, Marcus reconfigured the crystalline matrices one final time. Instead of absorbing and redirecting energy, they now began to broadcast a signal on frequencies that Zalari nervous systems found unbearable. The effect on the retreating ships was immediate and devastating. Their pilots were overwhelmed by the psychic feedback, losing control of their vessels. One by one, the ships crashed into the forest surrounding the quarry, their crews unconscious before they hit the ground. When the last ship fell, Marcus collapsed to his knees, exhausted by the effort. But through his link with Storm, he felt nothing but triumph. They had not only survived the Zalari attack, they had defeated it completely. Storm struggled over to Marcus and pressed his head against the boy's shoulder. Through their connection, Marcus felt waves of gratitude and respect that nearly brought tears to his eyes. "We did it," Marcus whispered. "We actually did it." But even as he spoke, Marcus could sense something new approaching. Ships were entering Earth's atmosphere, but these felt different. Instead of the cold malevolence of the Zalari, these new arrivals radiated warmth and concern. Storm's people had arrived. As the first Lycari ship descended into the quarry, Marcus felt a sense of completion that went beyond mere victory. He had saved Storm's life, but in doing so, he had also saved himself. He had found his purpose, his place in a universe that was far larger and more wonderful than he had ever imagined. The frightened boy who had discovered a chained alien in an abandoned quarry was gone. In his place stood someone who had faced down interstellar slave traders and won. Someone who had forged a bond between species that would change the course of galactic history. Marcus Chen had proven that humanity belonged among the stars. And he had done it not through superior technology or military might, but through the simple act of showing compassion to a creature in need. The bond between a human boy and an alien wolf had become something that neither species had expected, but that both desperately needed. As the L'Ikari ship touched down and its hatch began to open, Marcus knew that his real adventure was just beginning. Saturday morning dawned clear and cold, with a brittle autumn sky that seemed to stretch forever. Marcus arrived at the quarry before sunrise, carrying the completed amplifier in his backpack along with every battery he had been able to gather over the past week. Storm was waiting for him in their usual cave, but something was different. The alien's posture was more alert, more focused than Marcus had seen since the day he had freed him from the collar. Through their mental link, Marcus could feel Storm's mixture of anticipation and determination. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked as he began setting up the equipment. Storm's response came not in words but in a flood of emotion and imagery. Marcus saw Storm's family, his packmates, the silver fields of his homeworld. He felt Storm's desperate longing to see them again, balanced against his fear of what might happen to Marcus if things went wrong. "We're in this together," Marcus said firmly, "whatever happens." The amplifier looked even stranger in the morning light than it had in his father's garage. The crystalline matrices Storm had taught him to create seemed to glow with their own inner light, and the human electronic components appeared almost primitive by comparison. But Marcus had tested every connection, verified every circuit. The device would work. Setting up took nearly an hour. The amplifier had to be positioned precisely, aligned with astronomical coordinates that Storm provided through their mental link. The power cables snaked across the cave floor, connecting to a bank of car batteries that Marcus had painstakingly assembled. When everything was ready, Marcus took a deep breath and looked at his friend. Storm's violet eyes were steady and calm, showing no trace of the fear that Marcus felt churning in his own stomach. "Storm," Marcus began, then stopped. Through their link, he felt Storm's understanding. There was no need for words between them anymore. They both knew what this moment meant. Storm placed his paw on the primary input node of the amplifier. Immediately, the crystalline matrices began to glow brighter, and Marcus could hear a low humming sound that seemed to resonate in his bones. The effect on Storm was immediate and visible. The alien's silver-blue fur began to shimmer, and electric arcs played between the individual hairs. His violet eyes became luminous, and Marcus could feel the power flowing through their mental connection. Marcus activated the human electronics, watching as dials and meters registered power levels far beyond anything he had ever seen in his father's garage. The amplifier was working, channeling Storm's bioelectric signature and boosting it to incredible levels. But the strain on Storm was enormous. Marcus could feel it through their link, the way the power drain was affecting every cell in Storm's body. This was more than just energy expenditure. It was like Storm was broadcasting a piece of his very soul across the galaxy. The signal built for 10 minutes, growing stronger with each passing moment. Marcus monitored the equipment, making small adjustments to maintain optimal transmission levels. Through their mental connection, he could sense the signal spreading outward, racing across the light years at speeds that human science said were impossible. Then, suddenly, something changed. The humming sound shifted, becoming more complex, almost musical. The crystalline matrices began pulsing in rhythm with Storm's heartbeat, and Marcus felt a new presence touch the edge of their mental link. "They're responding," Marcus whispered, his voice filled with wonder. Through Storm's connection, Marcus could feel other minds touching theirs. L'Ikari minds filled with joy and relief at finding their lost pack member. But there was something else in their mental touch, something that made Marcus's heart race. The L'Ikari searchers were amazed by what they found. Not just Storm, alive and safe, but bonded to a human in a way they had never seen before. Through their link with Storm, they could sense Marcus's presence, his intelligence, his fierce loyalty to their packmate. The response came in waves of complex harmonics that the amplifier translated into something Marcus could understand. The L'Ikari search ship was 3 star systems away, but they were changing course immediately. They would reach Earth in approximately 72 hours, but the message carried a warning as well. The signal had been detected by others. The Zalari slave traders were also responding, and they would arrive much sooner. Their base on Earth had been activated, and hunter teams were already being deployed to track the source of the transmission. Storm's strength was fading rapidly, but he maintained the connection long enough to receive detailed coordinates and tactical information from his people. The Lycari were sharing everything they knew about Zalari capabilities and weaknesses, preparing Storm and Marcus for what was coming. When the transmission finally ended, Storm collapsed, his fur dim and his breathing labored. Marcus caught him as he fell, cradling the alien's head in his lap. "How long do we have?" Marcus asked, though he already suspected the answer. Through their weakened link, Storm communicated what the Lycari had told him. The Zalari hunter teams would reach the quarry within hours. They had tracking technology that could follow the signal back to its source with deadly accuracy. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. They had succeeded in contacting Storm's people, but in doing so, they had also signed their own death warrants. The Zalari would not leave witnesses, especially not witnesses who had proven capable of interfering with their operations. But Marcus was no longer the frightened boy who had stumbled upon a chained alien in an abandoned quarry. Weeks of bonding with Storm had changed him, strengthened him, given him access to knowledge and abilities he had never possessed before. "We're not going to just sit here and wait for them," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fear he felt. "You've taught me too much for that." Through their mental link, Storm shared images and information about Zalari hunting tactics. They preferred to attack from above, using aircraft that were nearly invisible to human detection methods. They would surround the quarry and close in systematically, leaving no escape routes. But Storm also shared something else. Lycari defensive techniques, strategies developed over centuries of dealing with various galactic threats. The Lycari might be peaceful by nature, but they were not helpless. Marcus's mind raced as he processed the information. The quarry itself could be turned into a defensive position if he was clever about it. The stone walls that had once seemed like a prison could become a fortress. More importantly, Storm had taught him how to create more than just communication devices. The same crystalline technology that had powered their amplifier could be adapted for other purposes. Defensive purposes. "Can you stay conscious long enough to help me build something?" Marcus asked. Storm's response was weak but determined. He would do whatever was necessary to protect Marcus, just as Marcus had protected him. Marcus spent the next 4 hours in a frenzy of activity, building devices that no human had ever constructed before. Using principles that Storm shared through their mental link, he created crystalline matrices designed to disrupt Zalari technology, and weapons that could channel energy in ways that defied human understanding of physics. As he worked, Marcus found himself changing in ways that went beyond mere knowledge. The mental link with Storm was becoming stronger, more permanent. He could feel Lycari instincts and abilities becoming part of his own consciousness. His reflexes became faster, his senses sharper. He could hear sounds that human ears shouldn't be able to detect and see details that should have been invisible. Most importantly, he could sense hostile intent approaching from a great distance. When the Zalari finally arrived, Marcus was ready for them. The first sign of their presence was a subtle change in the air pressure, barely noticeable but enough to alert Marcus's enhanced senses. The Zalari ships were using some kind of stealth technology, but it wasn't perfect. Marcus activated the defensive devices he had built, feeling power flow through the crystalline matrices. The entire quarry began to hum with energy, and the ancient stone walls took on a faint blue glow. Storm struggled to his feet, drawing strength from their shared connection. He was still weak from the transmission, but his presence bolstered Marcus's confidence. "Whatever happens," Marcus said quietly, "we face it together." Storm's response came as a warm pulse of agreement through their mental link. They had become something new, something that neither human nor Lycari science had ever anticipated. The bond between a human boy and an alien wolf was about to be tested in ways that would determine not just their own fate, but the future relationship between their species. Above them, invisible ships began their descent, carrying enemies who had no idea what they were about to face. Building the amplifier turned out to be more complex than Marcus had initially imagined, but also more exciting. Storm's knowledge of Lycari technology, combined with Marcus's understanding of human electronics, created possibilities that neither could have achieved alone. The first challenge was gathering components without arousing suspicion. Marcus couldn't simply walk into an electronics store and buy what he needed. Instead, he had to be creative, scavenging parts from old radios, broken televisions, and discarded computer equipment. His father's garage became his secret laboratory. Every day after visiting Storm, Marcus would spend hours working on the device, carefully hiding his progress between sessions. He told his parents he was building a science fair project, which wasn't entirely untrue. Storm proved to be an invaluable partner in the endeavor. Through their mental connection, he could guide Marcus through the more sophisticated aspects of the design. The Lycari understanding of bioelectric fields was far more advanced than human knowledge, but Marcus's practical skills in construction and electronics made up for his theoretical limitations. As they worked together, their bond deepened in ways that surprised them both. Marcus began to pick up fragments of Lycari language, while Storm developed an intuitive understanding of human technology. They were becoming something new, a hybrid intelligence that drew from both of their species' strengths. The amplifier itself was a strange-looking device that combined human electronic components with modifications that seemed to defy conventional physics. Storm had shown Marcus how to create crystalline matrices using common minerals, arranged in patterns that could channel and amplify bioelectric energy. But as the device neared completion, Marcus began to understand the true scope of what they were attempting. The signal they planned to broadcast would be incredibly powerful, detectable across multiple star systems. It would almost certainly attract attention from Storm's people, but it might also draw the notice of the Zalari. Through Storm's memories, Marcus had learned more about their enemies. The Zalari were technologically advanced but not particularly intelligent. They relied on brute force and superior weapons rather than innovation or strategy. However, they were also ruthless and would not hesitate to destroy anything that threatened their operations. If the Zalari detected the signal and traced it back to Earth, they would come looking for Storm, and when they found him, they would also find Marcus. The consequences for both of them would be severe, but Storm had shared something else with Marcus, something that gave him hope. In Lycari culture, the bond between Marcus and Storm was considered sacred. They had become what the Lycari called spirit-linked, a connection that transcended species boundaries and created a shared destiny. According to Lycari law and custom, anyone who harmed Storm would also be harming Marcus and vice versa. This meant that if Storm's people found them, Marcus would be under their protection. He would be considered family, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. The implications were staggering. Marcus was potentially the first human to be formally accepted into an alien society. He would be a bridge between worlds, a living symbol of what was possible when different species chose cooperation over conflict. But first, they had to survive long enough to make contact. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Marcus had been struggling with the power supply for the amplifier, unable to generate enough energy to reach the levels Storm said were necessary. Then Storm touched the device with his paw, channeling his own bioelectric field through the crystalline matrix. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The device hummed to life, glowing with a soft blue light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Storm's heartbeat. Through their mental link, Marcus could feel the power flowing through the circuits, amplified and focused by the alien technology. "It works," Marcus whispered, hardly daring to believe it. Storm's excitement was overwhelming, flooding through their connection like a wave of pure joy. For the first time since his capture, he could envision a future that included returning home to his people. But their celebration was short-lived. As they tested the device, Marcus noticed something troubling. The amplifier was drawing power not just from Storm's bioelectric field, but from his life force itself. Extended use would weaken Storm significantly, possibly permanently. When Marcus shared his concerns, Storm's response was immediate and unequivocal. He was willing to sacrifice anything necessary to send the signal. His people needed to know what had happened to the captured Lycari, and they needed to understand that Earth was inhabited by beings capable of compassion and intelligence. Marcus struggled with this decision for days. He had saved Storm's life only to discover that their plan might end it anyway. But Storm's determination was unwavering, and gradually Marcus came to understand the larger implications. This wasn't just about saving one Lycari from captivity. Storm's people were peaceful scholars and explorers, but they possessed technology and knowledge that could benefit all of humanity. If Marcus could establish contact between their species, it could usher in a new age of human development. Conversely, if the Zalari succeeded in their slave trading operations, Earth itself might eventually become a target. Humans, with their adaptability and determination, would be valuable commodities in the galactic slave trade. The choice became clear. They had to take the risk, not just for Storm's sake, but for the future of both their species. They decided to broadcast the signal on a Saturday morning, when Marcus could spend the entire day at the quarry without arousing suspicion. The plan was simple but dangerous. Storm would channel his bioelectric signature through the amplifier, while Marcus monitored the equipment and watched for any signs of detection by hostile forces. If everything went according to plan, Storm's people would receive the signal and come looking for him. If things went wrong, the Zalari would find them first, and both Marcus and Storm would face consequences too terrible to contemplate. As the appointed day approached, Marcus found himself thinking about his life before he had found Storm. It seemed small and limited compared to what he understood now. He had been a lonely kid in a small town, with no real purpose beyond getting through each day. Now he was part of something vast and important. He had formed a bond with an alien being that transcended the boundaries between species. He was about to attempt something that could change the course of human history. The responsibility was terrifying, but it was also exhilarating. Marcus had always felt different from the other kids in his town, like he didn't quite fit in with their simple concerns and limited ambitions. Now he understood why. He had been meant for something larger, something that required exactly the combination of intelligence, determination, and compassion that he possessed. On Friday night, as Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling, he made a promise to himself and to Storm. Whatever happened the next day, he would not let fear stop him from doing what was right. He had found his purpose in that abandoned quarry, and he was going to see it through to the end. The bond between them had started as a simple act of kindness, one boy helping a creature in need. But it had grown into something that could reshape the relationship between Earth and the stars. Marcus Chen was ready to find out if humanity was prepared for what came next. Marcus barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those violet eyes and felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He had saved an alien life, but now what? He couldn't tell his parents. They would either think he was lying, or worse, they would believe him and panic. At 5 in the morning, Marcus gave up on sleep. He crept downstairs and raided the refrigerator, packing everything he could carry without arousing suspicion. Leftover chicken, some beef jerky, a thermos of water, and the first aid kit from the bathroom cabinet. The quarry was shrouded in morning mist when Marcus arrived, making the ancient stone walls look like something from another world, which he reflected was probably appropriate given the circumstances. He found Storm in the exact cave he had suggested, curled up but alert. The alien creature looked better after a night's rest and the food from yesterday, but Marcus could see that he was still far from fully recovered. "Morning," Marcus said softly, and Storm's ears perked up at the sound of his voice. Over the next hour, Marcus established a routine that would become familiar over the following weeks. He checked Storm's wounds, provided fresh food and water, and then settled in to keep his new friend company before school. But today was different. Today, Storm seemed more animated, more present. As Marcus sat beside him in the cave, Storm moved closer until he was pressed against Marcus's side. The warmth was comforting, but it was the emotional connection that truly amazed Marcus. When Storm touched his paw to Marcus's hand this time, the mental link was stronger, clearer. Instead of chaotic images, Marcus received more structured communication. He saw Storm's gratitude but also his concern. Through the connection, Marcus understood that Storm was worried about the danger his presence might bring to Marcus. The images Storm shared showed the beings who had captured him. They were called the Zalari, and they were not known for their mercy. If they discovered that their prisoner had escaped, they would search for him. And if they found Marcus helping him, the consequences would be severe. But Marcus also sensed something else in Storm's mind. Hope. Storm believed that Marcus represented something the Zalari hadn't expected. Humans, as a species, were unknown to the galactic community. Earth was supposed to be a primitive world, inhabited by beings barely past their technological infancy. Yet here was a human child, who had not only freed Storm from bonds that had stymied rescue attempts by Storm's own people, but who had done so with nothing but intuition and determination. Storm's people, the Lycari, prized intelligence and problem-solving ability above all else. In their culture, Marcus had already proven himself worthy of respect. Through their mental connection, Marcus began to understand more about Storm's species and their place in the galaxy. The Lycari were explorers and scholars traveling between worlds to study and learn. They were peaceful by nature but formidable when threatened. Storm himself was young by Lycari standards, barely equivalent to a human teenager, but he possessed knowledge that far exceeded anything Marcus had learned in school. As the days passed, Storm began to recover his strength. His wounds healed with remarkable speed, and his natural grace returned. Marcus learned that the Lycari had enhanced healing abilities, along with heightened senses and the telepathic abilities that allowed their mental connection. More importantly, Storm began to teach Marcus about the wider universe. Through their link, Marcus learned about star charts and navigation, about the various species that populated the galaxy, and about technologies that made human science look primitive by comparison. But Storm was learning too. Through Marcus's memories and explanations, he began to understand human culture and society. He was fascinated by human concepts like friendship, loyalty, and the willingness to help strangers without expectation of reward. In Lycari society, such behavior existed but was typically limited to family units or established pack bonds. The idea that a human child would risk his own safety for a being he had never met before was both foreign and deeply impressive to Storm. Marcus found himself changing as well. The mental connection with Storm was enhancing his own abilities. His pattern recognition improved dramatically, his reflexes became faster, and his understanding of complex systems grew more sophisticated. When he returned to school each day, he found himself answering questions before his teachers finished asking them. His parents noticed the change but attributed it to normal adolescent development. His grades improved, he seemed more confident, and he was spending more time outdoors, which they saw as healthy. But Marcus was walking a dangerous line. The more time he spent with Storm, the stronger their bond became. And the stronger their bond became, the more he understood about the threats they faced. Through Storm's memories, Marcus learned that the Zalari were slave traders who captured beings from less advanced worlds to sell to other species. Storm's people had been targeted because of their intelligence and natural abilities. The Lycari's peaceful nature made them valuable as servants and researchers for more aggressive species. The Zalari had established a base somewhere on Earth, hidden from human detection but close enough to process their prisoners before shipping them off-world. Storm had been marked for disposal not because he was defective, but because he had proven too strong-willed to be easily controlled. This knowledge filled Marcus with a cold anger he had never experienced before. The idea that there were beings out there who thought they could simply take people from their families and sell them like property was intolerable. But Storm also shared something that gave Marcus hope. The Lycari had not given up on their missing people. Search parties were looking for Storm and the others who had been taken. The problem was that Earth was largely unmapped by galactic standards, and the searchers didn't know where to look. However, Storm possessed a unique identifier, a biosignature that could be detected by Lycari technology if they came close enough. The challenge was getting a signal to them without alerting the Zalari to Storm's location. Marcus spent hours thinking about this problem, turning it over in his mind while he sat through classes or helped his father in the garage. There had to be a solution, some way to get a message to Storm's people without revealing their location to their enemies. The answer came to him during a physics lesson about radio frequencies. If Storm could generate some kind of signal that was uniquely Lycari, and if Marcus could find a way to amplify and broadcast that signal, they might be able to reach Storm's people. But they would need equipment, and they would need to be smart about how they used it. The Zalari would be monitoring for exactly this kind of activity. When Marcus shared his idea with Storm, the aliens' excitement was palpable. Through their connection, Storm explained that all Lycari possessed the ability to generate a unique bioelectric signature. With the right amplification, this signature could be broadcast across vast distances. The challenge would be building the amplifier without arousing suspicion and finding a way to power it. But Marcus was his father's son, and he had grown up around electronics and machinery. If anyone could figure out how to build what they needed, it was him. That night, Marcus lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind racing with possibilities. He was no longer just helping an injured animal. He was part of something larger, something that could change not only Storm's fate but potentially the relationship between humanity and the wider galaxy. The scared, lonely boy who had found a chained creature in an abandoned quarry was gone. In his place was someone who understood that the universe was vast and dangerous, but also full of possibilities. Marcus Chen was about to attempt something that would either save his friend or get them both killed. But for the first time in his life, he felt truly alive. Storm had given him purpose, knowledge, and friendship. Now it was time for Marcus to return the favor and show the galaxy what humans were truly capable of when they set their minds to something. The bond between a human boy and an alien wolf had become something neither of their species had ever experienced before, and it was about to change everything. Marcus spent the next hour examining the collar from every angle he could manage, without getting too close to the creature's teeth. Despite its weakened state, he respected the fact that it was still a predator, and a frightened one at that. The metal was unlike anything he had seen before, smooth and warm to the touch with those strange pulsing symbols that seemed to respond to his presence. The collar had no visible clasps or hinges. It appeared to be a single piece of metal that had somehow been formed around the creature's neck, but Marcus refused to believe it was impossible to remove. Everything made by intelligent beings had a purpose, and most things had a way to be undone. The creature watched him work, its breathing growing more labored with each passing hour. Marcus could see that time was running out. He needed to try a different approach. Remembering his father's toolbox back home, Marcus made a decision. "I'll be right back," he told the creature. "I'm going to get some tools. Don't give up on me, okay?" The creature's ears twitched at his words, and Marcus could have sworn he saw understanding in those violet eyes. The run home took 15 minutes, but it felt like hours. Marcus burst through the front door and headed straight for the garage, grabbing his father's smallest wire cutters, a set of precision screwdrivers, and a small flashlight. He also raided the kitchen, filling a water bottle and grabbing more food. His mother called out from the living room asking about his day, and Marcus forced himself to sound normal as he replied, "Just working on a project, Mom. Be back before dinner." The run back to the quarry was even faster, driven by the fear that he might be too late. But when he arrived, the creature was still breathing, still watching the path he had taken as if it had known he would return. "Told you I'd be back," Marcus panted, dropping to his knees beside the creature. This time he noticed something he had missed before. The symbols on the collar weren't just glowing randomly. They pulsed in a specific pattern like a code or a sequence. Marcus had always been good with patterns, a skill that made him excellent at video games and math puzzles. He watched the sequence repeat several times, memorizing the order. 3 long pulses, 2 short ones, another long pulse, then 4 rapid flashes. It repeated exactly the same way each time. Acting on instinct, Marcus placed his finger on the first symbol in the sequence and pressed gently. The symbol flared brighter for a moment, then dimmed. He moved to the second symbol, then the third. Following the pattern he had observed, the creature lifted its head slightly, watching what he was doing with what Marcus could only describe as surprise. When Marcus pressed the final symbol in the sequence, something extraordinary happened. The collar split along an invisible seam, opening like a flower. The heavy metal fell away from the creature's neck, landing in the dust with a dull thud. The creature's reaction was immediate and startling. It lifted its head fully for the first time, revealing the true nobility of its features. Without the collar obscuring his view, Marcus could see that this was no ordinary animal. Its bone structure was too refined, its eyes too intelligent. It looked almost regal, like pictures Marcus had seen of wolves in nature documentaries, but elevated somehow. The creature struggled to its feet, swaying slightly from weakness, but standing nonetheless. It was larger than Marcus had realized, its shoulder reaching nearly to his chest even in its malnourished state. Despite its size, it moved with a fluid grace that spoke of strength and speed. For a moment, Marcus wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. The creature was free now, and while it seemed grateful, it was still a predator. But instead of attacking or running, the creature did something completely unexpected. It sat down and extended one of its front paws toward Marcus. Marcus stared at the offered paw, understanding flooding through him. This wasn't just an animal. This was a being capable of gratitude, of communication, of complex thought. Without hesitation, he reached out and gently took the paw in his hands. The moment their skin made contact, Marcus felt a jolt of electricity run through him. But it wasn't painful. Instead, it felt like a connection, a bridge being built between two very different forms of consciousness. Images flashed through Marcus's mind. Not his own memories, but someone else's. He saw stars he didn't recognize, ships that moved through space like silverfish through water, and beings that looked similar to the creature before him but fully grown and magnificent. He saw this creature, younger and smaller, playing with others of its kind in fields of silver grass under a purple sky. He saw the joy in its movements, the security of family and pack. And then he saw the attack, ships descending from above, weapons that turned the silver grass to ash, families torn apart. He saw this creature, just a pup, being loaded onto a transport with others of its kind. He saw fear and confusion and the devastating realization that everything safe and familiar was gone. The images came faster now. He saw laboratories, scientists of various species conducting experiments. He saw the pup subjected to tests, its blood drawn, its reflexes measured. He saw it growing larger and stronger despite the captivity, maintaining its dignity even in chains. He saw the decision to dispose of the failed experiments. He saw the creature being loaded into another ship, brought to Earth and chained in the quarry. He saw the beings who had left it there, tall and thin with pale skin and large black eyes. They had spoken in clicking sounds that somehow Marcus understood meant, "Let it die slowly," as a warning to others. The connection broke as suddenly as it had begun, leaving Marcus gasping and the creature watching him with what looked like amazement. "You're not from Earth," Marcus whispered. Stating the obvious, the creature's response surprised him. It shook its head in a very human gesture, then tilted its head to one side in what Marcus recognized as a question. "You understand me," Marcus continued, his mind racing. "You're intelligent. You're a person, not just an animal." This time the creature nodded, its violet eyes bright with something that might have been relief. Marcus sat back on his heels, trying to process what had just happened. He had freed an alien prisoner of war. The implications were staggering, but they were also clear. This creature needed help, and Marcus was the only one who could provide it. "Are you hurt anywhere else?" he asked. The creature extended its left hind leg, and Marcus could see what looked like a burn mark on its flank. The wound was healing but looked painful. "Okay," Marcus said, his mind shifting into problem-solving mode. "First things first. You need food and water." He opened the water bottle and held it out. The creature lapped at it gratefully, drinking nearly the entire contents. Then Marcus offered the sandwich he had brought, tearing it into manageable pieces. As the creature ate, Marcus found himself studying its features more closely. Its bone structure was elegant but powerful, built for both speed and strength. Its fur, now that he could see it properly, wasn't just silver blue but seemed to contain actual silver threads that caught the light. Most remarkable were its eyes. They weren't just violet but seemed to contain depths that spoke of intelligence far beyond what Marcus had initially assumed. This wasn't just a smart animal. This was a being with thoughts, emotions, and probably a complex understanding of the universe that far exceeded his own. "What's your name?" Marcus asked softly. The creature looked at him for a long moment, then made a sound that was part howl, part harmony. It was beautiful and complex, unlike anything Marcus had ever heard. "I can't pronounce that," Marcus admitted. "Would it be okay if I called you something I can say?" The creature nodded again. Marcus thought for a moment. "How about Storm? Because of your coloring and because you survived something terrible." The creature that was now Storm seemed to consider this, then made a soft chuffing sound that Marcus interpreted as approval. As the sun began to set over the quarry, Marcus realized he had to make another decision. He couldn't leave Storm here, but he couldn't take a clearly alien creature home either, at least not yet. "I have to go home for the night," he told Storm. "But I'll be back first thing in the morning with more food and supplies. There's a cave system deeper in the quarry where you can hide safely. Will you trust me?" Storm stood and touched Marcus's hand again with his paw. This time the connection was gentler, warmer. Marcus felt a sense of trust and gratitude that was almost overwhelming. As Marcus gathered his tools and prepared to leave, Storm did something that made him smile. The alien creature looked directly into his eyes and, in a gesture that was purely human, gave him what could only be described as a nod of respect. Marcus Chen had come to the quarry looking for adventure. Instead, he had found something far more important. He had found a friend from another world, and possibly his own destiny. 12-year-old Marcus Chen had always been drawn to the old quarry at the edge of his small town. The abandoned mining site, with its towering walls of red stone and deep pools of rainwater, was officially off limits to children. But Marcus wasn't like other kids. Where they saw danger, he saw adventure. Where they heard warnings, he heard challenges. On this particular autumn afternoon, the air was crisp and filled with the scent of dying leaves. Marcus had told his parents he was going to the library, which wasn't entirely a lie. He would go to the library eventually, after he explored the quarry one more time. The path down the quarry wall was treacherous, loose rocks shifting under his worn sneakers. Marcus moved carefully, his backpack bouncing against his spine with each calculated step. He had been coming here for months, mapping out safe routes and hidden caves. The quarry was his secret kingdom, a place where he could think without interruption. As he reached the bottom, something caught his attention. A sound that didn't belong in this empty place. It was faint, almost lost in the whisper of wind through the stone corridors. But Marcus had learned to trust his instincts. The sound was rhythmic, desperate, like labored breathing. Following the noise, Marcus picked his way through scattered boulders and pools of stagnant water. The sound grew stronger, more distinct. It was definitely breathing, but there was something wrong with it. Something that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He rounded a massive chunk of fallen limestone and stopped dead in his tracks. There, chained to a rusted iron spike driven deep into the quarry wall, was a creature unlike anything he had ever seen. At first glance, it looked like a wolf, but larger than any wolf Marcus had studied in his nature books. Its fur was a deep silver blue that seemed to shimmer even in the quarry's dim light. The creature was young, probably just a pup, but it was still the size of a medium dog. Its breathing was shallow and rapid, and Marcus could see dried blood matting the fur around a heavy metal collar. The chain attached to the collar was short, barely allowing the creature to lie down properly. Marcus approached slowly, his heart hammering in his chest. The creature's eyes snapped open at the sound of his footsteps. They were unlike any animal eyes Marcus had ever seen. They were intelligent, aware, and filled with a pain that went beyond physical suffering. They were also a striking violet color that seemed to glow with an inner light. The creature tried to lift its head but collapsed back down, too weak to maintain the effort. Marcus could see that it hadn't eaten in days, maybe weeks. Its ribs were visible through its matted fur, and its water bowl was bone dry, cracked from the sun. "Hey there," Marcus whispered, keeping his voice as gentle as possible. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, but it made no move to flee or attack. It simply watched him with those impossible violet eyes, as if trying to determine whether this human boy meant salvation or more suffering. Marcus slowly reached into his backpack and pulled out the sandwich his mother had packed for his lunch. Turkey and cheese on whole wheat bread. Nothing fancy, but it was food. He tore off a small piece and held it out, staying just beyond the reach of the chain. "Are you hungry?" he asked softly. The creature's nostrils flared as it caught the scent of the food. For a moment, Marcus saw something that looked almost like hope flicker in those violet eyes, but then the creature turned its head away, as if it had given up on the possibility of help. Marcus felt something twist in his chest. He had always been the kid who brought home stray cats and injured birds, much to his parents' exasperation. But this was different. This creature wasn't just hurt or abandoned. Someone had deliberately chained it here to die. The thought made him angry in a way he had never experienced before. He looked around the quarry, checking to make sure he was truly alone. The nearest house was half a mile away, and the quarry was hidden from the main road by a thick line of trees. Whoever had left this creature here had chosen the spot carefully. They had wanted to ensure that no one would find it, but they hadn't counted on Marcus Chen. Marcus had always been small for his age, but he was tough. Growing up as the only Asian kid in a predominantly white town had taught him to be resourceful and self-reliant. He had learned early that if he wanted something done, he usually had to do it himself. Looking at the creature's condition, Marcus knew he didn't have much time. The pup was dying, and it might only have hours left. He needed to act fast, but he also needed to be smart about it. That collar looked heavy and complex, nothing like a normal dog collar. And the chain was thick and strong, probably beyond his ability to break. But Marcus had always been good with his hands. His father was a mechanic, and Marcus had spent countless hours in the garage, learning how things worked and how to fix them. If this collar had been put on, there had to be a way to take it off. He moved closer, speaking in a calm, steady voice. "I'm going to help you, okay? I don't know who did this to you, but I'm going to get you out of here." The creature's eyes tracked his movement, but it didn't try to bite or struggle. It was either too weak to fight, or it somehow understood that Marcus was trying to help. Marcus chose to believe it was the latter. As he knelt beside the creature, Marcus got his first close look at the collar. It was made of some kind of metal he didn't recognize, dark and smooth with strange markings etched into its surface. The markings didn't look like any language he had ever seen. They seemed to pulse with a faint light of their own. Marcus swallowed hard. Whatever this creature was, wherever it had come from, it was becoming clear that it wasn't entirely of this world, and that meant that whoever had chained it here might not be entirely of this world either. But that didn't change anything. Marcus had found a creature in pain, and he was going to help it. That was just who he was. It was who he had always been. He just hoped he would live long enough to figure out exactly what he was getting himself into.